Okay, so welcome, good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to this third appointment with the Yalta Special Interest Group for Sign Language Assessment on its online edition. Very pleased to find some friends in the attendees and some new people as well. Just before I introduce our guest, sorry, please note that the webinar will be recorded and then shared on the Yalta webpage, as well as the SIG Facebook page. So if you don't want to be recorded, just avoid turning on your webcam. You can just switch it off. We also remind you again to keep your microphone on the off position unless you're the next to speak, of course. Now, the topic for this year's webinar is the assessment of sign language interaction skills. For this purpose, we're happy to introduce you to Said Jamal Alias, hoping I pronounce it well, and Evelyn Bors, both from Utrecht University of Applied Science, as well as Christian Ratman and Thomas Geisler from Humboldt University in Berlin. My German pronunciation as well as my Netherlandese is very terrible. Sorry about that. Now, just to give you a few information about the timing, each couple will have 20 minutes to introduce their topic, followed by 10 minutes for specific questions and answers. We will allow for additional 30 minutes at the end of the webinar for further discussions around today's topic. In order to organize questions in the best possible way, I suggest you to write or ask for your turn to talk or sign in the chat. I will keep track of the questions and call you in as soon as we open the Q&A session. Okay, so let's begin with the first presentation, which is titled Assessing Sign Language by Means of an Interview. The presenters are Said Jamal Alias and Evelyn Bors from Utrecht University of Applied Science. Said?
All right. Hi, everyone. Hi.
Okay, just a few more minutes for me to introduce you. 5 minutes more, sorry. Well, 2 minutes actually.
Oh, okay, of course.
Okay, Said started his education as a teacher of sign language of the Netherlands in 2010. He was born in Iraq and moved to the Netherlands at age 7. He is profoundly deaf and acquired NGT at age 21. As a late learner, he is a role model for both deaf and hearing students. Said teaches NGT and sign language pedagogy at Utrecht University of Applied Science in the Teacher and Interpreter program. Evelyn Bors graduated as teacher in GT in 2001 and obtained her degree as interpreter NGT in 2005. She's hearing and learned NGT at age 21. She earned her PhD with a dissertation on the sign language acquisition process of adult learners of NGT. Evelyn teaches NGT and sign language pedagogy at Utrecht University of Applied Science in the Teacher and Interpreter program. So please, thank you very much for your talk.
Okay, we'll first share our PowerPoint. I hope you can all see the PowerPoint now. Is that all right? Okay, so firstly, we're happy to present to you today, and this presentation is we give this presentation through the University of Applied Sciences in Utrecht. And I will tell you something about my experiences and then give the word to Evelien. So back in 2014, I was still a student and I had my own assessment. I was there with a deaf examiner and I did not really know what the test was about before I started. So I was signing away, and in the end, my level was determined and I got C-level proficiency. But what that actually entailed in detail, I did not know yet at that point. Then later on, I got some experience working as a teacher myself in different locations. And I worked for 8 years as a NGT sign language teacher. And then at a certain point, I decided I wanted to go back to the University of Applied Sciences and become a teacher there. So I went for a job interview and got accepted and started teaching at the University of Applied Sciences. And that was 1.5 years ago. Then I learned more about the interview assessment and how it works exactly. And that is when I learned more about the system and the structure behind it, I realized that it was quite interesting. And Evelien is going to tell you more in detail how the interview assessment came to be and how it's being implemented right now.
We have a problem with sharing. I can't. Oh, great. Okay. Okay. The NFA is an adjective of NGT functional assessment. How does it work? There are two persons, the interviewer and the candidate. And the interviewer asks questions and the candidate answers in sign language, and they will be recorded. About 20 minutes, the interview has been recorded and put into a database. And two independently observers, assessors, look at the footage and assess the footage. And if they're done with the assessment, they look at what the level of the student is. Example, A2 or B1. But it's not the same. And then they discuss about which level. Is it A2, A2 or B1? And then they match up and determine the level. And if they're not determined the level, a third person is brought in and they will describe the level. And how did it start? It's in 2012. And in America, there already was a SLPI assessment, and we adapted that to the NGT situation. And we did that by 3 things. First of all, in America, you have 11 levels. We don't have 11 levels. We have 5 levels. It has to do with serve. And we have levels A1 to C. 5 levels. And in America, they have 11 levels. And we severed to all the descriptors to match up with the other levels from America. And that we converted. The American Sign Language has the same elements as NGT. There has a much, it's not always the same, but there's overlapping. Some elements in Dutch Sign Language had to be adapted. And the third adaptation was in America, you have 3 assessors. They were writing down with the assessment. And here we have 2. And we adapted that. So in the past, we adapted that. And a SLPI trainer comes here to us to teach us about the NFA and teaches us about how we have to assess this and how this is going to work. And they came here 4 times. And then one of the group members is going to teach the next group. And the SLPI trainer teaches that one person so that they can teach the next group, and we can do that independently for our own group. So that's the way it works. And the assessors, we have to have the knowledge of linguistics, of language. Interviews and rating by trained and certified assessors. Linguistic knowledge and NTT is prerequisite. Next slide, please. Okay, but why do we use the NFA? There are such more other possibilities to do an assessment. There are 2 reasons. The first reason, if the student is shy or has a superficial answer and the conversation stays at a basic level, the interviewer has the opportunity to defer deeper, to go more in depth. And the second reason,
Jag hittade rum 117. Det här rummet är inte städat.
Someone has a much lower level, then they need help, and the interviewer can give them help. Then you can see the increase of the level, and then the interviewer can see how much support and help the candidate needs, or it stays the same. Next slide, please. And it's related to the sig4. You have tasks within. Before, for example, asking questions and answering questions, or meeting a deaf person and having a communication with them, or making announcements. And those tasks, they are on this sig4 and on different levels. And you can see what the person can do at that level. And that's related to linguistic tools. And they have to adapt that to themselves. And the knowledge has to be there, and then they better and increase the level of their sign language. So the assessment form and also the assessment will see what tools the person has adapted, acquired. Here you can see the cone shaped, and you can see where if a person has increased their level, then also the quality and the quantity increases with that. And if they increase the level, it means they have more tools adapted to them. And the knowledge is also there. And also the quantity and quality increases. If you have more language and knowledge acquired, then the sign language will be better. So if you see in the cone, it goes up. And level A1 you don't have a lot of language. It's minimal. Your lexicon is minimal and your grammar is minimal. And if you level A2, it increases. And also you can see the cone that it widens. And if the level goes up, then you have more time to, you need more time to adapt the sign language. And then we have more to assess and see at the student. It means if the level increases and the lexicon is more adapted and the grammarly elements are more adapted and the pace is quicker and increases, then if those three things increase, then you see progress. And if the level increases highly, and those three things then you have less phonological mistakes, and also less mistakes with the choice of signs, and also lesser miscommunication and less breaks in the sign language. And our assessment form, we write down what the students does right about the lexicon, about the grammarly elements, and we write that down. And also we write down where the mistakes are, the phonologically or the choice of sign is by mistake. And if we wrote that down and we look at that, and then we can assess and decide the level. And somebody who has lesser mistakes, for example, within the grammar, then the level is increased. Now it's already Said's turn.
Wow. So I hope that you found this process interesting and you learned more about it now. So, but this assessment itself, how does that actually work? What kind of questions are asked? Well, I will give you a couple of examples of those questions now. So the interviewer could talk about different topics, for example, studying, work, or maybe volunteering, someone's free time, someone's hobbies, or family, someone's living situation. Those are things from our everyday life that you could talk about during that assessment. And we also try to go in depth during that assessment. So if you say, okay, if the answer is just yes, then you can ask them if they can go more into depth. And you could also ask someone who is responsible for what, for example. So the student really has to think about a certain working team, and they might work with a certain person in a certain team and then with another one in another team. So you really work on those localizations and other sign language specific aspects. Another topic that you could talk about is someone's thesis, for example. What is your research question? And you can also ask how their research process went. Did it go well, or did you run into did you have any challenges? And then in that way, you can determine someone's sign language level based on their production and reaction to those questions. Another example would be, for example, do you have experience renting or buying a house or a living space? And there's many more examples that I could give. And you can also ask questions to encourage students to use more classifiers. Some students will be able to sign fluently, but there are also certain questions that are better to not ask. For example, I'll go to the next slide quickly. I'll just wait for the interpreter for a second. Certain no-goes is what I meant. There might be certain sensitive topics that we better not ask questions about. So for example, when a family member recently passed away or when someone's parents divorced, then it might be better to stay away from going into depth in those topics. And of course, the student themselves can also let you know if certain topics are off limits for them personally. There are also certain questions that you might want to ask, but the interviewer has to take into account that certain people cannot even answer those questions in their mother tongue. So then it might be best to also not ask those questions in sign language, because they will not be able to answer those follow-up questions because they just don't have the knowledge about those topics. So if someone will not be able to answer that question in their native language, then they probably will not be able to answer it in sign language. Those are certain things that you could take into account when performing an interview-based assessment.
You had great examples. And for example, just Said was busy with an NFA and he was talking to a student. And it appears that the student just had a family member pass away, but Said didn't know. So he asked a question about the family and the student answers, oh, that person just died. Or, okay, then we use another subject. Then we cross over to another subject. We also saw if you ask questions to the student, then they start signing away and we see, oh, they have prepared. We can see that. And then we choose another subject. So, and always you can find a subject the student hasn't prepared. And in that way, we can see if the student can spontaneously start signing.
So yeah, for example, if you'd ask a question about someone's parents, then they might say, well, they'll tell you something about their parents. But if you really want to go into depth, you could also ask them about the characteristics of their parents, their personalities. So about their brothers and sisters. So ask them questions that they did not prepare for and try to catch them on that. That is how you encourage people to spontaneously produce the language.
Sometimes it happens that we ask a question about work or something, and then the person immediately starts signing rapidly, and then you can see that is prepared. And if you ask your dad, what kind of work does he do? And exactly. Sometimes it happens, what Said also said in the example, the student doesn't know the answer. And the answer is something with computers, something, I don't know. Yeah, but what does your dad do? They don't know. Sometimes it happens within the interview that we keep asking questions and the student really doesn't know.
And then you're stuck. Yes, exactly.
And we prepare the students. If you really don't know the answer, then just say, I don't know. And maybe there's just a question and you think, oh, I'm stuck, or it's too private, I don't want to answer this question, and just say, I don't want to answer this question. And some students find that tricky because you don't know if the person really doesn't know the answer or
if it's related to their language level, right? For example, if you ask them about their dad's work, then Or you could deviate to asking them a question about their partner's work or about volunteering. Have you ever volunteered before? Well, just tell me about that. So you can switch around and pick your topics that way.
And keep in mind that we are trained to teach. We are also interviewer and assessor. We have both functions. And the interviewer does know how the assessment is being assessed. So keep that in mind. And during the interview, you know, I saw classifiers or role shift I saw, but I didn't see context within the signs. So then you can ask questions about those elements, and then you can encourage them to
show more.
elicit the signs you want to see. Sometimes we have a checklist and we check all the boxes. If they are done, okay, done, then the interview is over. But sometimes it happens and I look at the student and I didn't see a classifier, for example, and I ask a question, do you have any hobbies? And the student says, oh, my hobby is baking. Then I can ask more questions about baking. For example, then they have to show me the classifiers. You have to do, I do this in the oven, and that's the way we use, and we try to elicit that. And sometimes it happens that the students afterwards come, yeah, what, do you have some stupid questions you asked me during the NFA? Yeah, but I wish I wanted to see that thing.
And yeah, and it could also happen, for example, you can ask them about certain memories that they have. So about baking a cake, for example. What was the last cake that you baked? And the answer could be, well, I baked a strawberry cake. And then you can ask them about how they made it exactly. So you have to think back on how they did that. Yeah.
Or the last book you've read, or the last movie you've seen. Yeah.
Yeah. And this way we hope to see certain grammatical elements and lexical elements, and that together determines someone's level.
Sometimes we look at the face of the interviewer. If the interviewer is fluent, the interviewer, and the student looks at the interviewer and they're signing away, and you see, oh, okay, okay, I understand. And you can see it's obvious.
Yeah. Yes.
And then when the level is low, the communication will get stuck, and we can see at the facial expressions of the interviewer. What? Then we can see that the level is lower. That's a signal.
Or the other way around, of course. It's called back channeling, which means that if a student can show B2 level proficiency and the interviewer is asking them questions, they will nod their heads. And the student can also say, well, what do you mean exactly? And it's really a back and forth process without any interruptions. It goes way smoother that way. And that's a really nice example of how a B2 level assessment interview could go.
It means that we have different signals to look for. Grammatical elements, phonological elements, and I just told everything about that. But also facial expressions from the interviewer, the miscommunications that occur. Yeah, that's a signal that we all write down with the assess. And then we see afterwards what we wrote down, and then we decide which level it is. And then we have a rubrics, and we can use that to match up with the level it's decided that it's going to be, B2, for example.
Can you please start to wrap up? Sorry for that.
And if two assessors will not do not agree on the level, then they'll try to make it work together. So they'll both give arguments on why the level should be a certain level. But if they do not agree, then they will need a third assessor to determine the final level.
Our time's up.
Okay, all right.
We are gonna
Stop sharing.
sharing the PowerPoint.
Thank you very much, Jamal and Evelyn, for your presentation. Really interesting. Unfortunately, I had to cut in to stop you, but it was really amazing to see you, to learn from your experience. We have 10 minutes for questions, if anyone have any. There was one during your speech, which I actually cannot place in a context. So I would like to ask the person who wrote that question if they want to add more on it. It's from Soproni Souza. He writes something about Dutch Sign Language teacher program, and he also links something about it, but I don't really understand what's the context. Soproni, can you please reformulate your question so that we can understand what you were asking? Or if you want to come in and sign something to us? There's a noise, yes. There you go. I don't understand whether you were talking about the teacher training program or students learning sign language. So you don't understand, she.
The sign language teacher program is a program in Utrecht where students learn sign language, but to become a teacher, if they're not natives, they need to learn sign language. So, which is why they need to pass the assessment. Evelyn also did research on L2 learners, which is why we're doing this presentation together on NFA. I hope it's clearer now.
And I want to add to that, we work at the University of Interpreters and Teacher of Dutch Sign Language.
Right.
Both programs we teach.
Right, so Beppy comes in saying, so.
And
oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
And
Go ahead, Jamal.
Yeah. So if after 4 years a student can get their diploma, and for that they need to pass B2 level, and then they will become a NGT teacher or NGT interpreter.
Yeah, I see that also Beppy added a piece to the answer.
Yeah.
Beppy Mandenbogad. So I think it's
yeah.
okay.
Thank you, Beppy. Thank you. Yeah, I see it. I see that Beppy is here too. Nice.
I would also like to thank personally Martina Hulesova for reminding that the seminar will be uploaded on the Alta page, as well as the sig4sign Facebook page, which I linked in the chat. So this is also for those who just logged in. The seminar is being recorded and it will be uploaded on the Alta Facebook, on the sig4sign Facebook page, as well as the Alta website.
Oh, that's great.
Okay. So if there's no other questions for Evelyn and Jamal, no immediate question at least, I would move over to the next presenters. Thank you very much, Jamal and Evelyn. Very interesting. Oh, there's another one.
Thank you too.
There's a thank you and a quick question from Dinat Sagari. What are some challenges you have faced?
Yeah, challenges we faced. Well, we just gave an example. So if two assessors cannot agree on the level, we need to call in a third assessor. And the assessment form is really elaborate. So it can take a lot of time to assess one student. And we also have to think about certain technical questions. And as an interviewer, you also really need time to think about that, so you can ask the right questions in that exact moment.
You have to sign and you have to do the practical things together.
Right.
Okay, hello everyone. Good evening. So Thomas and I's presentation will be focusing on the assessment of sign language, and we will be taking turns going forward. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So we're looking specifically at sign language interactions. So just a little bit of background about the ProSign project. We will be talking a little bit about ECML, as well as the sig4 version 2020. And we are looking specifically at a modality inclusive framework, not simply spoken languages, but also signed languages. And thirdly, we're going to be doing a lit review, just explaining what exists in the field with regards to interactions of spoken language L2 users. And there is plenty of research within this field, but now we need to expand that research further into the signed modality. And so we are looking specifically at a research-based interactive model. We have a BA in Deaf Studies at Humboldt University, and we have expanded to an MA in sign language interpreting. And to be able to do the MA, you actually have to have a B2 level. So we're going to be looking specifically at the B2 level for our talk today. The goal of this assessment of interactions is really to see how we can best assess language proficiency. And then we will be discussing a number of issues within the field that Thomas has actually been looking at recently. So to interact, linguistic interactions at a B2 level follow this general model. They are typically very fluent, efficient. They can address a wide number of registers and topics within the academic sphere, within the social sphere. The jumping between different topics is relatively easy, and the actual mapping of thoughts is rather comprehensive. There is not a lot of work involved. It is relatively spontaneous in terms of language usage, and it's fairly flexible and malleable. Turn taking is easy and natural and grammatically accurate. They have a strong level of grammatical control. Next slide, please. So looking at this, this assessment, to really understand the test design and layout, we need to first look at the descriptors. the structure and procedure, and then the topics of assessment. So I'll be going ahead and passing over to Thomas here. So yeah, we can see with grammar, as Christian has already addressed, there is a number of grammatical or a high level of grammatical control. Interlocutors can express themselves freely and comfortably in a logical order. And they can use the language fluently, accurately, and effectively on a wide range of general, academic, vocational, or leisure topics, marking clearly the relationships between ideas. So this is more global communication. So we have been thinking about how we can best design an assessment for signers who use sign language at a B2 level. We have determined that about 4 to 6 interactants is best. We have a time frame of video recordings depending on a group size of about 4 people, so that would be about 20 minutes. And we would be addressing a number of topics. So we can use a specialist subject and address those specialist subjects with the test. Next slide, please. So at a B2 level of interaction, there are certain types of media that one might be able to use. So there has been some discussion about the specific types of critical media that would be good for use. But ideally, we want to have media that is operating already at a B2 level. So we would have one moderator, as well as a couple of video cameras, and the video cameras are for the purpose of creating a video that will allow assessors to review the interaction later to ensure that nothing is missed. Now, in terms of a moderator, you know, the ASLPI has one method and one model, and we have a slightly different model. We do need a native signer, an L1, M1, someone who really has been exposed to the language and who can debate the language. And someone who can also manage time to keep interlocutors on track. In my experience, I've worked with some students who are very strong signers and some who are not so strong. And so we need to be able to assess the ways in which we can serve those students as well, to ensure the balance of participation for all involved. And we also need to have include 4 different assessors who can help, or assistants rather, who can help keep that that assessment on track. So, assessing B2 interactions. This is incredibly hard work. We've looked a bit at the structure of the possible design of the test, and we do want to address specific points that will allow us to best design this test. At Humboldt University, we have about 5 assessors, or 5 assessments rather, looking at different capacities. So we have range, accuracy, fluency, coherence, and interaction. And so we're specifically focusing for the purposes of this presentation and the design of this test on interaction, this last token. So sig4 uses this model of interaction. So we have interaction activities and interaction strategies. For the purposes of today's presentation, I will be focusing on interaction strategies, which is an incredibly interesting topic to really understand how language assessment may work. Next slide, please. So with regards to interaction strategies, sig4 has three subcategories: turn-taking, cooperating, and asking for clarification. And these three subcategories expand even further. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of nitty-gritty that we can get into, but essentially, those who do have a B2 level will usually be able to intervene appropriately in discussion. They can initiate, maintain, and end discourse properly. They can hold on to information and take their turn appropriately. They can link ideas appropriately in a coherent manner. They can use specific stock phrases that in appropriate contexts. So this is a B2 level of interaction. And this largely focuses on turn-taking. These are the competencies that are relevant to turn-taking specifically. So in addition to turn-taking, there is also cooperating and clarification. For the sake of time, I have combined these latter two topics. But those operating at a B2 level can help the discussion, can support comprehension, and work at discussing topics on a familiar ground. They can summarize the points of the discussion, propose the next steps. They can respond to questions and ask follow-up questions. If there is something that remains unclear to them, they can get clarification of ambiguous points. They can use a number of communication strategies for clarification more largely. So if an individual can do all of these things and does maintain all of these competencies, then we can look at next steps for assessment. Next slide, please. So we've been thinking about how to best categorize competencies and interaction strategies. So if turn-taking is good, or if turn-taking is not so good, maybe the individual is taking turns in culturally and linguistically inappropriate ways, then we need to look at that more. If they are able to request the floor, if they're able to introduce new ideas, if they are able to participate in discourse points, and if they are able to conclude their turn appropriately, then we are able to actually give those specific points a more quantitative register or more quantitative score. So where do these percentages actually come from? These come from Scala. That's SCALA. This is an assessment strategy that we use in Germany. So a better level of competency will have a higher percentage, a lower level of competency will have a lower percentage. And it's on a scale of 1 through 5. So in order to have a B2 level, to pass at a B2 level, they must be able to reach about 60%. Of course, in order to determine that an individual has enough competency for certification, anything below a 60%, even a 50%, may not be appropriate. So now I'm going to be talking about strategies, interaction strategies. So I'm just going to be looking at that first column right there, and then we'll be moving forward. So you can see at the top, we have A, B, C. So if they have Scala pertaining to these specific levels, then we are able to assume that they are able to operate at those levels, and then we may be able to test even further, assess even further to ensure what level they may actually be at. They may actually be at a higher level than previously assumed. So we do just want a full assessment of their competencies. So we can see these two lines on this graph, this black line. This is an assessment of the level that they are operating at, and the green is an assessment of the average. So if they dip into that green area, that is unfortunately not great for that student. We want to ensure that they are operating at a higher level than average. So this graph actually allows us to determine whether or not they are able to operate at the level of competency necessary for certification, for interpretation, and for overall proficiency and fluency. And it allows us to focus on specific learning objectives moving forward. So we also have a summative assessment and a formative assessment. So in these formative assessments, we are able to engage in specific activities. We can take some notes on their capacities. We can interact more with more one-on-one pedagogical approaches to ensure that these students of these sign languages do actually progress in a notable and identifiable way. And then we also have student peer feedback. And then we also have the ELP, which is the self-assessment for learners, which ensures the self-assessment for learners' autonomy. It's the European language portfolio, but it allows students to identify their own capacities by themselves and then seek out the tools that they need. So that is the end of my focus with regards to interaction assessment. So on to Christian, please. So I do see already that there are a number of questions coming up in the chat. I do really appreciate that. So we will be addressing those soon. I do want to clarify some things with regards to interaction and testing and assessment of interaction levels. We have A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2. And so we want to we want to understand the structures that exist within each level and framework to better understand students' proficiency. So in the BA, we have about 2 years of sign language education. And yes, we see in the chat there is a lot of there's a question for defining interaction. This is a topic that we can address in the near future, but our point right now is to understand what interactions look like at a basic level, what turn-taking strategies look like, what the structure of interaction may be, and then we can address other points of interest moving forward. So then we also want to look at presential versus online interactions. You know, when we have online interactions, as we've had recently with the COVID-19 pandemic, that affects how we are able to assess proficiency levels and how we are able to interact more globally. So the sig4 2020 model has its own subcategory for online interactions. For example, if we are interacting via video and we have to hold the phone in one hand, it may be difficult to clearly assess one's two-handed signs, for example. And then we also want to look at sig4's interaction assessment, and as well as the ASLPI. We understand that the NFA, or the Dutch version of assessment, sign language assessment, is similar and inspired by the ASLPI. So we want to recognize that, and then also recognize that we want a holistic assessment of interaction. Next slide. So for this BA program in deaf studies, or for other programs of education, sign language education, we do not have a huge amount of time. So it is important that the design of the assessment does not take a huge amount of time in a short period, to ensure that everyone can use the structure accordingly in the near future. So we want to look at specific skills and competencies that can be self-directed and as well as assessment that can be completed by instructors themselves. And so we'll be looking at a number of aspects of interaction, comprehension versus production and the like. And it's important that there is a difference between a training program versus language certification. The training program will include a number of levels that are graded and therefore linked to one another. And then we have a language certification, which is more focused on one's own capacity. And then we'll later be focusing on standardization. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you.
I'm so sorry to have to cut into these wonderful presentations because I can see how people are interested in. Sorry. Yeah. Again, I'm sorry for having to cut into your presentation because both were so interesting and I feel very bad about having to interrupt your talk. Also because I see there are so many, there's a discussion going on already in the chat. So as Christian already mentioned during his talk, there was a question by Martina Hulesova asking when regarding cooperating strategies, you said a B2 signer could use these strategies to help the discussion or the other discussant. Is this mediation or interaction or both? And how would you assess the strategies if the discussion goes smoothly and the use of strategies is not visible? They do not need to use them. So you did already answer in the chat. I don't know if you want to add something more now, or if you want me to read your answer. Okay, I'll read.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead and read it, and then I'll.
Okay, so Christian replied, according to CFR 2020, it is to be grouped under interaction strategies. Okay.
Thomas is saying, yeah, and I'd like to add to that a little bit. So mediation is actually a new competency, and it's not that there is, if there is no issues in terms of comprehension, then it's more about, that would be more along the lines of mediation. Mediation is required in order to clarify. It's a semiotic strategy that one may use. And sometimes people will come in with a number of other semiotic strategies and tools for communication. Mediation allows for writing. It allows for other forms of language modalities, code switching, register shifts, maybe shifting from an A1 to a B2 level, etc.
Very interesting.
This is a really interesting new field.
Yeah, it is. I see many people are thanking you for the webinar, for the presentation. Just before I go on with the questions, just please remember that we have a short survey for you before you leave, which is important for us to assess how we did this time and what kind of topic you would like to see in the next webinar. So just please, before you go, remember to answer this very, very short webinar, very, very short survey, sorry. So there's another question from Beppy. How are these graphs generated automatically? How long does inputting the data take? Christian Short replied that graphs can be generated automatically after entering information. I don't know if you want to add something more on that.
Thomas, yeah, would you like to say something? Oh, and also, please say how long it takes from end to end. Sure. Yeah. So it really depends on the task at hand. You know, for A levels, A1, A2, it's actually relatively short, but it does tessellate outwards from there. And so yes, the first time we assessed and gathered the information to put into that graph was incredibly difficult. But yeah, now we are using a more automated system. So we have a number of things that we focus on, range, accuracy, etc. And it does take a very long time, but it does depend on the level. I wish my experience was that it was incredibly quick, but no, it takes an incredibly long time. It is not automatic. But now we do need to address that further. And Christian said, yeah, but before there were 4 reference, and now we have 6 reference, and so we do need to address how long that might actually take. But yeah, how long has it taken in the past? You know, in the past, I mean, 20 minutes can be a 20-minute assessment can be double or triple the amount of time.
Yeah, long time for assessment. We know something about it. Okay, so there was also a discussion between Evelyn and Tobias about ASLPI, and Evelyn was saying that she thinks that ASLPI is another assessment that than SLPI. The NFA is an adaptation of the SLPI. This is what Evelyn says, and Tobias replies, the ASLPI has been developed at Gallaudet University, DC, and the SLPI at Rochester Institute of Technology, New York. So I don't know if you want to add something to this, or I would like to pin Evelyn and Jamal video again, so we can probably open the discussion table. We only have 15 minutes, but both your talks were very, very interesting. So I think maybe someone have more questions for you. Oh, there you are. I couldn't find you. Okay, you're pinned, fine. Okay, so any further questions for both, or any discussion you want to open? We have 15 more minutes before our time is up, so please put it to good use.
I think Katja has a question, Maria.
Okay, I haven't seen it. I don't see it. Oh, okay, sure, fine. Sorry.
Just
hello, everybody. Greetings to everyone. I am so excited to see all of you and to see the 2 different methods of assessment, the ASLPI as well as the other one that was presented by Christian and Thomas. In Switzerland, we have another way. We believe that, you know, the ASLPI is good for people who would like to just have their level of signing assessed. You know, if they are, you know, it's not useful. The ASLPI is not useful for other methods or for other purposes. So when we train someone, then you can use a different assessment method. So you can either just assess the receptive skill or just assess the signing skill. So there are 4 different areas. However, at the University of Humboldt, I must say that your system is very good, where you have 4 participants that are in an interactive discussion. And I think that makes a very good way of assessing interactively. However, it does take a lot of time. And I think there are various forms of assessment that can be used. However, we have to use what we have available and at our disposal. So it's just very important that we, that's just my experience.
Yeah, so thank you for that comment. Linking it in with having 4 participants or 6 participants, to have one moderator working one-on-one with each may allow us to address certain competencies like production, like comprehension and the like, but it takes so much time. And there is a lot of adaptation that is required. So we wanted to stretch the assessment to be able to have multiple participants. And Thomas is saying, yeah, we have a number of strategies for assessment. In our everyday lives, we have certain deaf associations or deaf cultural requirements, deaf modes of interaction. And so we need to assess one's own competency for interacting and employing certain interactive strategies. There is one-on-one interaction, which may go up to a C2 level, but they may not be able to, these participants may not be able to operate at a C2 level in a group interaction, for example. So it's an interesting topic of focus.
Tobias also wanted to pop in, so please go ahead.
Excuse me. Yeah, actually, I just want to add something on the situation in German-speaking part of Switzerland. We are going to launch a project in next year, where we actually, our goal is to assess interaction, but we haven't really decided on the method. If it will be an SLPI is one option, but it could be similar formats as Thomas and Christian were presenting. We're even thinking about peer interaction. Not sure if this is going to work, but we're kind of like opening up again and to see what's the best would be for our context. And this will start next year in January.
Thank you, Tobias, for the information. Anyone else who wants to share a thought or comment? Sharon Hill writes, thank you for these presentations and the Q&A. It helped to see how others are using assessment. We have used the ASLPI in our university, but we now use the SLPI due to the detailed feedback and diagnostic given. I'm here in the States, Texas, Houston. So if there's no any other question, I would ask my own about the adaptation from ASLPI or SLPI. Since we sort of moved with the ProSign and also the CFR adaptation to assessing sign language following the CFR, I was wondering if you found something different in this transformation process, or if there was some specific challenge you found that you would like to share here, or if it was just very smooth. So just curious about these 2 different ways of assessing, if we want.
We can't use the interpreters.
No, yeah, sorry, I was just.
Can you hear us now? Yeah. Okay. I will go back. SLPI has 11 levels and we have 5 levels. A1, A2, A1, A2, B1, B2, AC. And we don't use C1 or C2. We don't make a difference between C1 or C2. So we have 5 levels. That means you saw the cone-shaped image of my presentation. It goes wider when you go above, and B1 level and B2 takes a long time to acquire that level. And sometimes students will take little steps to get to B2 level, and they're still B1. So the student gets B1 determined at the assessment, and then they still get B1, and then they make progress, but they still get B1, and they can see their own progress. They still stay B1, and that's
right,
what's challenging.
Right. And they also need to reflect on their own learning process, because we give them their final results, but they really need to look in detail on what they need to improve on then if they want to reach a higher level.
Oh, I have a question for you too. Do you discriminate between a receptive tests and productive tests, or receptive, like comprehension tests, productive tests, and interactive tests?
Yes. Do you want to explain, Evelyn?
Yeah, we have 3 methods of NFA.
Mm-hmm.
NFA, SLPI, and then receptive and lexical context. That's the elements we use. And if you do 3 times the NFA, and I thought 10 times the lexicon and 10 times the
receptive tests, and that is all within 4 years. And it's also good to know that within those 3 topics, any topic is not allowed to go on for longer than 7 minutes. So you need to talk about a formal topic and then move on to different topics too.
And the NFA, you sit across from each other, and the interviewer asks you questions and the student answers. But it means that there are minimal receptive testing
is separate.
Thank you.
It's very, I could continue the discussion, but unfortunately our time is running out. So I'm going to close my question. If there's no other question, I would let Tobias open the, oh, there's one, Emilio Ferreiro. Oh, meanwhile, you see the questionnaire popping up to your screen. So if you want to answer, you can. Emilio, I can't find you no more. There was a question from Emilio Ferreiro, but he's not here anymore. So I don't know what happened. There he is. Emilio, please go ahead. Oh, okay.
Hi, yeah, so I had a question regarding Thomas's, well, first, I'm Emilio, I'm from Spain. So with regards to Thomas and Christian's presentation, I had a question with regards to the system of assessment. I think these are really, really good points. And it seems to me to be very, very complicated, and there's a lot of information involved. So it must be incredibly time consuming. With hearing people, we have maybe a certain amount of time that is required, and so I'm just wondering how long it takes to assess. And Thomas is saying, our intention is to objectively test people and to have a fact-based approach. Sometimes we have assessors that come in working entirely subjectively. Maybe they had a good breakfast and maybe in the afternoon they're getting hungry again. And so we do want to have an objective framework for assessment. And so as I previously mentioned, we do have for the interactive test, we do have 4 participants interacting together, but for the comprehension test, this is all automatic. It's just pass or fail. And so the interactive test can be about 2 hours long. And we do need to film it because there is information that could be missed otherwise. And Christian is saying, also, if a student or if a participant decides to appeal the decision that is made, they can use that film, that video as evidence. And Emilio saying, can I add one more question? So with regards to this system, it feels like it could be carried over into online assessments as well. Well, I don't know about online assessments. I don't think we are able to do that yet. sig4 says that we must follow a more presential approach at this time, but what that actually means is a little bit unclear. So we are working on that currently. And Christian is saying, yeah, so we do need to actually look at competencies as well. And we're not taking the full assessment framework, a full range of assessment strategies from sig4, because that would be impossible. We're taking specific tools that sig4 offers us to ensure that we can understand the results that are made available to us. Yeah,
Thank you, Emilio, for your question and for joining in. I'm sorry, I need to wrap up and close this very interesting webinar today. Thank you, Christian, Thomas, Evelyn, and Jamal for joining us and for your beautiful presentations. Thank you to the interpreters for their wonderful job, both NGT and International Science. Please don't forget to click on the survey button and fill it in. We really enjoyed having you today, and we hope to see you in the next SIG webinar. So thank you very much. We hope you learned as much as we did today, and thank you so much for everything. Have a good evening.
And thank you to the hosts as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Tobias is hidden somewhere, but he's also thankful for you being here. Bye.